Story number 1, The Patient in Room 306. I never believed in ghosts, not really. I had worked the night shift at St. Mercy Hospital for 3 years, and I had seen things that would make most people's skin crawl. Patients talking to unseen visitors in their final moments, strange sounds from empty hallways, and that eerie, unsettling feeling of being watched when you know you're alone. But none of that ever truly scared me. Not until room 306. It started with the call button. At exactly 2:06 a.m. every night, the call light for room 306 would flicker on at the nurse's station. It had become a running joke among us, because that room had been empty for months. The last patient who stayed there, a frail elderly man with dementia, had passed away under what some nurses whispered were unnatural circumstances. The details were never clear. No one liked talking about it. "Guess the ghosts need some painkillers," my coworker Sarah would joke whenever the call button went off. But when I was alone on shift, it wasn't funny anymore. One night, curiosity got the best of me. The halls were heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your ears like thick fog. I made my way toward room 306, my footsteps sounding too loud against the linoleum floor. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to see a sliver of darkness inside. I hesitated. Something felt wrong. Taking a breath, I reached for the light switch and flicked it on. The fluorescent globe buzzed to life, illuminating an empty bed and a perfectly normal hospital room. But the air was ice cold. A shiver ran down my spine. The heating in this wing was always spotty, but this cold wasn't normal. It was the kind that seeped into your bones, the kind that made your breath come out in visible puffs, even though it wasn't supposed to be that cold. I walked over to the call button. It wasn't pressed. The wires were intact. There was no reason for it to have gone off. Just as I turned to leave, I heard it. A whisper. So close to my ear that I felt the warmth of breath that wasn't mine. It said my name. I spun around so fast my vision blurred. Nothing. Just the empty bed. The bathroom door slightly ajar. The air thick and unmoving. My heart pounded as I stepped back into the hallway, my hands trembling as I locked the door behind me. I told myself I was just exhausted, just hearing things. But deep down, I knew better. The next night I avoided that side of the hallway. I kept my head down, focused on my charts, pretended room 306 didn't exist. But at 2:06 a.m., the call light flickered on again, and this time the intercom crackled. I froze. A sound seeped through the static, a faint, raspy breath, and then a voice, weak, barely audible. "Help me." A chill ran through my body so violently I almost dropped my clipboard. My mouth went dry. The words were clear, real. Someone was in there. My pulse pounded in my ears as I reached for the intercom button with a shaky hand. My voice came out hoarse. "Who is this?" Silence. Then the light clicked off. The hallway seemed darker than before. I turned my head slowly, dreading what I might see. The door to room 306 was no longer locked. It was slightly open, wide enough for someone to be watching. I forced myself to look away, swallowing the fear clawing up my throat. I needed proof. I needed someone else to hear this. I ran to find Sarah. The third night. Sarah rolled her eyes when I asked her to check room 306 with me. "You're freaking yourself out over nothing," she sighed, but she followed anyway. As we stood outside the door, my heart pounded so hard it hurt. I could feel something inside, watching, waiting. I pushed the door open. The room was exactly the same, except for the smell. A rotting odor clung to the air, thick and suffocating. Sarah gagged. "What the hell is that?" Before I could answer, the bathroom door creaked open, slowly. A shadow stood behind the frosted glass, tall, thin, motionless. Sarah grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin, but I couldn't move. My body had locked up, as if something unseen was holding me in place. Then the shadow lurched forward. It slammed against the glass. The entire room seemed to shudder. I don't remember how we ran out. I just remember the pure terror in my chest, the way my legs felt too heavy, the way my breath came out in strangled gasps. I slammed the door shut behind us. We never talked about it again. Not properly. But we both knew. No one went into room 306 after that. The final night. A week later, a new patient was admitted to room 306, a man in his 40s, recovering from a car accident. I watched as they wheeled him in. I wanted to say something to tell them not to put him there, but what would I say? That a shadow tried to get to us? That the room was wrong? I stayed silent. The next morning he was found unresponsive, mouth wide open in a silent scream, his face twisted in pure terror. The doctors ruled it a sudden cardiac event. They said it happened in his sleep, that he never saw it coming. But I knew better, because at exactly 2:06 a.m. the call button for room 306 lit up again, and this time on the intercom, the voice wasn't asking for help. It was laughing. Story number 2, the wrong surgery. I woke up to the sound of metal clinking. My body felt heavy, my limbs unmovable. The bright surgical lights above me burned into my eyes, but I couldn't blink. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, as if I had been screaming, yet no sound escaped my lips. I wasn't supposed to be awake. I could hear them, voices, muted whispers, shadows moving just beyond the blinding light. My mind was foggy, but one thing became clear. These weren't my doctors. Panic shot through me like electricity, but my body wouldn't respond. I was trapped inside myself, aware, but paralyzed. A cold hand touched my forehead, fingers pressing against my temple as if checking for something. My breathing quickened, but I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't run. Still conscious, a voice muttered. It was deep, unfamiliar. Another voice responded, raspy and amused. Good. Let's begin. Number. No. No. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I tried to think. The last thing I remembered was coming in for a routine appendectomy, a minor surgery, nothing complicated. They had prepped me, given me anesthesia, and then blackness. But now I was here, awake, with people I didn't recognize. I strained to focus. There were 4 of them. Their faces were obscured behind surgical masks, their eyes hidden behind tinted goggles. Their scrubs were clean, but something about them felt off, not like normal doctors. They moved with precision, their hands working swiftly, as if they had done this 100 times before. But what were they doing to me? I couldn't see past my chest. A tray of instruments gleamed under the lights, scalpels, clamps, syringes filled with something dark and thick. The air smelled sterile, yet wrong, like bleach masking something rotten. Then I felt it, a blade pressing into my skin. The pain should have been unbearable, but it wasn't. It was distant, muted, like my body was no longer fully mine. A part of me was being cut open, yet I remained trapped in silent terror, forced to endure whatever was happening. His vitals are steady, one of them noted, a strong one. A different voice chuckled, and I felt fingers inside me, moving something, shifting, rearranging. My stomach churned. What the hell were they doing? This wasn't an appendectomy. I fought harder against my body, willing my fingers to twitch, my lips to part, my throat to release even the faintest scream. But nothing. I was locked inside my own flesh, a prisoner to whatever this was. One of them leaned closer. His goggles reflected my own body, my skin pulled back, something pulsing beneath my ribs. Then he spoke. You weren't supposed to be here. A long pause. But now that you are, the blade dug deeper. Something shifted inside me, something cold, something wrong. My heartbeat stuttered. A new kind of panic gripped me, a primal fear, a warning from something deep inside. My body knew before I did. They were putting something inside me. My mind screamed, trying to wake up, trying to break free. I willed every nerve, every muscle to move, to fight, but I remained frozen, a helpless witness to whatever horror they were performing on me. The whispers grew urgent. The shadows moved faster. The pain became distant, then nothing. Blackness swallowed me again. When I woke up, I was back in my hospital room. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, casting warm golden light across the sterile white sheets. The machines beeped softly beside me. A dull ache throbbed in my stomach. My hands felt weak as I lifted them, trembling, and pulled back the hospital gown. A bandage covered my lower abdomen. The surgery was over. For a moment I thought maybe it had been a nightmare, a terrifying, vivid hallucination from the anesthesia. Then the nurse walked in. She smiled, checking my IV, my chart, the machines. "You're doing well," she said brightly. "The surgery went smoothly." I swallowed hard, my throat still dry. "My appendix." My voice came out hoarse. She paused. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "Yes, of course." But something was wrong. I knew what a fresh surgery should feel like, the soreness, the healing wound, but this felt different, deeper. My body didn't feel like mine anymore. I waited until she left. Then, with shaking hands, I pressed against my stomach. Something shifted beneath my skin. I felt it move. A wave of nausea rolled over me. My breathing hitched as I pressed harder, trying to understand, trying to believe this wasn't real. But it was. The skin over my stomach was too smooth, too precise, like it had been stitched back together with something other than thread. I forced myself to stand. My legs were weak, but I moved, stumbling toward the mirror above the sink. I lifted my gown again, peeling back the bandage. What I saw made my stomach lurch. The incision was too clean. The skin around it was unnaturally pale, with no sign of stitches, no bruising, no redness, as if the wound had healed days ago. My fingers traced the edges. The moment I pressed down, something inside me twitched. I gasped, stumbling back. Then I saw the scar more clearly. It wasn't a straight surgical line. It was a symbol, something carved into me, something I didn't understand. The door clicked open. I turned sharply. The doctor from the surgery stood there, not the one I had met before my operation, not my assigned surgeon. One of them. His tinted goggles were gone now, revealing dark, sunken eyes. He smiled, not a warm, reassuring smile, but something else, something knowing. "How are you feeling?" he asked, voice calm. I couldn't speak. My hands trembled as they gripped the sink. He took a step closer. His smile widened. "You'll adjust soon enough." My breath hitched. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Then, without another word, he turned and left. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to claw at my stomach and rip out whatever they had put inside me. But I didn't, because deep down, in some horrible, unexplainable way, I already knew, and whatever they had done to me, it wasn't finished. Story number 3. The janitor who wasn't there. The first time I saw him, I thought nothing of it, just an old janitor pushing his mop down the dimly lit hospital hallway, the overhead lights flickering as if struggling to stay awake. I was on my second night shift at St. Augustine's, a small understaffed hospital with an eerie silence that clung to its walls like a bad memory. He looked like any other janitor, worn uniform, faded name tag, slow movements of someone who had been doing the same job for decades. I nodded at him as I passed. He barely acknowledged me, just kept mopping the same section of floor. I didn't think about him again until the third night. That was when I noticed something strange. No matter when I walked past that hallway, whether at the start of my shift or hours into the night, he was always there. Same spot. Same slow, deliberate movements. At first, I assumed he was just an older worker, stuck in a routine. But then something clicked. His bucket never had any water. The mop, always dry. He wasn't cleaning anything. Curiosity got the better of me. The next time I saw him, I slowed down, pretending to check my phone. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. His face was slack, almost expressionless. His lips moved, but no words came out. Something about him made my skin crawl. I finally worked up the courage to ask a coworker. "Hey, who's the janitor that works nights?" Sarah, one of the senior nurses, gave me a confused look. "What janitor?" I frowned. "The old guy. Thin, gray hair, always mopping near the ICU." She shook her head. "We don't have a night janitor." I laughed, thinking she was messing with me. I see him every night. You're telling me I'm imagining things?" Sarah's face changed. The humor drained from her expression. "Describe him again." "I did." Her face went pale. "That sounds like Walter." "Okay. Who's Walter?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He was a janitor here. A long time ago. Died on the job. Heart attack. Right there in the hallway near the ICU. But that was at least 10 years ago." A cold shiver crept up my spine. "That's not funny," I said, forcing a chuckle. "I'm not joking." Her voice was flat. "We used to hear stories about him. Some of the older nurses said they'd see him still working. At night, always in the same spot." I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a different janitor who just looked like Walter. Maybe Sarah was messing with me. But the unease stayed. That night, I made a decision. I needed to prove to myself that Walter, or whoever he was just a regular guy. I walked back down that hallway at exactly 3 a.m. The hospital was quiet, except for the occasional beeping of machines, and there he was, mopping the same spot. Slow, methodical. His head tilted slightly downward. His dry mop glided soundlessly over the floor. My chest tightened. I forced myself to keep walking, my footsteps echoing. I cleared my throat. "Long night?" I asked. He stopped. For the first time he looked up at me. His eyes, hollow, empty, like something had scooped out the light inside. I froze. My body screamed at me to run, but I was locked in place. His mouth moved, but the sound came after his lips had already stopped. The delay was unnatural, like a bad recording. "You see me?" The words were faint, distant, as if spoken from somewhere far away. I tried to answer, but my throat was dry. I nodded. His head jerked slightly as if processing something. Then, in a low, rasping voice, he said, "They never see me." A sharp chill ran through me. His grip on the mop tightened. His fingers, too long, too bony, curled around the wooden handle. I took a step back. His face twitched. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. The lights above us flickered violently. The hallway felt longer, darker, like the walls were stretching away from me. Then I blinked, and he was gone. The mop lay abandoned on the floor. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back at the nurse's station, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Sarah took one look at me and paled. "You saw him, didn't you?" I nodded. She swallowed hard. "You need to be careful. He doesn't like being noticed." That should have been the end of it. I should have stopped looking. But I didn't, because the next night at exactly 3 a.m. my pager buzzed. A call from ICU hallway. I knew before I even looked. Room 306. With a sinking feeling, I walked toward the hallway. My hands trembled as I turned the corner. And there he was, not mopping, not moving, just standing, facing me, his head tilted, watching. The lights flickered once, then went out completely. The hallway was silent. My breath hitched. Then, right next to my ear, his whisper, "Now you're one of them." The lights came back on. The hallway was empty. But my reflection in the window, it wasn't mine. It was his. Story number 4. The Voices in the Morgue. I never wanted to work the night shift, but at St. Vincent Hospital, new interns didn't get a choice. We were assigned the worst tasks: stocking supply rooms, handling paperwork, and the one job everyone dreaded, retrieving bodies from the morgue. I told myself it was just another part of the hospital, just a cold room with metal drawers. Nothing more, nothing less. That belief shattered on my second week. It was past 2 a.m. when I got the request. A patient had passed in the ICU, and I had to retrieve the body for transport. I sighed, grabbed my clipboard, and headed toward the basement. The morgue was the coldest part of the hospital, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones and stays there. The air smelled of disinfectant mixed with something faintly metallic, something old and stale. I had been here before, but tonight felt different. The hallway seemed longer. The overhead lights flickered, casting strange shadows against the walls. My footsteps echoed, as if the place was too empty, too hollow. I reached the morgue doors and swiped my ID. The heavy steel doors groaned open. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The lights above flickered once, then dimmed. The silence was thick, unnatural. I had been here enough times to know the faint hum of the cooling system, the distant buzz of fluorescent lights, but now, nothing. Then I heard it, a voice, faint, muffled, coming from inside the morgue. My breath caught. My pulse pounded against my ribs. I scanned the room. Empty. No one else was scheduled to be here. Maybe it was the vents, maybe my tired brain was playing tricks on me. Then I heard it again. Low, whispering. I turned toward the body drawers, lined up in perfect, sterile rows. The whispering was coming from behind them. My entire body went rigid. My brain screamed at me to leave, to run, to forget this ever happened. But I stepped forward. The closer I got, the clearer the voices became. Dozens of them, some fast and frantic, others slow and slurred, some murmuring, others almost ungiggling. I reached out with a shaking hand and pressed my palm against the nearest metal door. It was vibrating. I yanked my hand back. No. This wasn't real. This was exhaustion, overwork, a trick of the mind. Then something knocked. A single sharp tap from inside the drawer. I staggered backward. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would burst. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, an urgent chorus of voices begging, laughing, sobbing. Then, beneath it all, a voice spoke clearly. "Let me out." My blood turned to ice. The knock came again, harder, faster. I ran. I don't remember how I made it out, but I didn't stop until I was back in the ICU, gasping for air. Sarah, one of the senior nurses, frowned as she saw me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh, but my voice shook. "You ever hear anything weird in the morgue?" She stiffened. "That told me everything." After a pause, she exhaled. "You shouldn't talk about it." That answer was worse than any ghost story. I didn't go back down there alone again. But the worst part? The next night, at 2 a.m., the morgue doors opened on their own, and my pager buzzed with a message from a number that didn't exist. One word. Soon. Story number 5. The Baby That Was Never Born. I always hated walking past room 217. It was tucked away at the end of the maternity ward, its door always closed, the lights always off. The nurses whispered about it, and the older staff avoided even mentioning its existence. Some said the room was just used for storage, others claimed it had been sealed for years. But every so often, in the dead of night, I would hear it. A baby crying. It started on my 3rd week of night shifts. At first I thought I was imagining it, just the wind or maybe a distant newborn in another room. But no, the sound was too close, too clear. A soft, weak cry, like a newborn struggling for breath. It sent chills up my spine. I asked my coworker Sarah if there were any infants admitted that night. She shook her head. "No births today. The nursery's empty." I hesitated. Then, "Do you hear that?" She glanced down the hallway toward room 217. Her face paled. She turned back to me, voice low. "Don't talk about it." That should have been my warning to stop, but I couldn't. The crying continued every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. One night I made the mistake of going closer. The hallway was eerily silent except for that fragile, heartbreaking cry. It seeped through the door of room 217, echoing softly like a distant memory. My chest tightened. Something about it felt wrong. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling, but just as I touched it, the crying stopped. The silence was absolute. I swallowed hard and stepped back. The air in the hallway had changed, heavy, suffocating, watching. I turned and walked away, forcing myself to ignore the prickle at the back of my neck. The next night, I found Sarah at the nurse's station. "Tell me the truth," I said. "What happened in that room?" She hesitated, looking over her shoulder as if someone might hear. Then in a hushed voice she said, "Room 217 used to be a maternity room. Years ago a woman came in. Complications during labor. The baby never made it." A weight settled in my stomach. "And the mother?" Sarah's face darkened. She didn't survive either, but before she died, she kept saying she could hear him crying. She begged the nurses to bring her baby, said he was cold, said he was alone. The room felt colder. I shuddered. After she passed, Sarah continued, some nurses claimed they still heard the baby. Patients reported someone standing by their beds at night, just watching. Eventually the hospital shut the room down. A chill crawled up my spine. But if it's shut down, why do I still hear it? Sarah's expression turned grim. Because some cries never stop. I should have left it alone. I should have ignored it. But that night, when I heard the crying again, I made a mistake. I opened the door. The room was empty. The air was thick with dust, the scent of something old, forgotten. The only furniture left was a single rocking chair sitting in the middle of the room. The air was colder than the rest of the hospital, the shadows heavier. Then, the chair rocked. A sharp, sudden creak broke the silence. My breath caught in my throat. Then I heard it. A whisper. He's still here. The voice was right behind me. I turned sharply, but there was no one there. I ran. From that night on, I avoided room 217, but the crying didn't stop. It followed me, down hallways in the supply room, even when I was alone in my car after my shift. One night, as I lay in bed, half asleep, I felt something cold press against my chest. A weight, small, fragile, and then a tiny breath against my cheek. The baby that was never born had finally found me. Story number 6. The patient who saw something. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into his room. The way he looked at me. Wide, bloodshot eyes, pupils blown out in fear, darting to the corners of the room as if something was lurking just out of sight. His hands gripped the blanket so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The heart monitor beeped faster than it should have for someone who was just recovering from a minor accident. "Mr. Gallagher," I said gently, trying to check his vitals. He flinched as if I had startled him, though I had barely moved. His lips trembled, his breathing shallow and ragged. "He's still here," he whispered. I frowned, glancing at his chart. He had been in a car accident 2 nights ago, nothing serious. Concussion, a few stitches. But his panic? That wasn't from physical pain. "Who's here?" I asked. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Slowly, his eyes moved toward the ceiling. His lips barely parted as he whispered, "Don't you see him?" A slow chill crept up my spine. My gaze flickered upward. The fluorescent light buzzed softly. Nothing unusual. "I don't see anything," I said carefully. Gallagher shook his head violently. "He's watching. He never blinks." His voice dropped lower. "I can hear him breathing. Can't you hear it?" I couldn't, but the room felt wrong. I glanced at the security camera in the corner. A red light blinked steadily, recording as usual. I exhaled, forcing a smile. "You've been through a lot. Maybe your mind's just playing tricks." "No." His sudden outburst made me jump. "It's not my mind. I saw him. I saw his face." He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "He came with me, from the crash. He was there, standing on the road when no one should have been there." His fingers dug into my skin. I tried to stay calm. "Okay, what did he look like?" Gallagher's breath hitched. He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked toward the window, but the curtains were drawn. He stared for too long. His body was rigid. The color drained from his face. Then his lips parted, and he whispered, "I can't describe it." A deep, primal fear laced his voice. My stomach twisted. "Try," I urged softly. His hands trembled. His face wasn't right. Like it was there and not there, like he didn't have eyes, but I could feel him staring. His voice broke. "And he followed me. He's here now, in this room." I turned, trying to shake the unease creeping up my neck. The room was empty, silent. Then the lights flickered. A soft tap, tap, tap sounded against the window. I swallowed hard. It was probably just the wind. But we were on the 5th floor. Gallagher's breathing grew erratic. "Don't look," he whispered. "If you look too long, he sees you back." A sharp metallic snap rang through the air. The heart monitor flatlined. Gallagher's eyes bulged. His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. His fingers clawed at his throat, his body arching violently off the bed. I lunged for the call button. "Code Blue, room 509. My voice shook. The door slammed shut. I spun around. My breath caught in my throat. The room was darker now, like the walls had pulled the shadows closer. The monitor crackled, the red numbers flickering. 2:03 a.m. Gallagher's body twisted unnaturally. His chest caved inward, his hands still gripping his throat. His eyes rolled back, and just as the door burst open and the crash team rushed in, he stopped. Dead. No cause, no warning, just gone. I backed away as the doctors worked. I knew it wouldn't matter. I felt it. Something had been in that room. Something had been waiting. The security footage was pulled the next morning. I shouldn't have watched it, but I did. At 2:03 a.m., the lights flickered, the monitor glitched, and then, for a single, horrifying frame, there was a tall, thin shape standing in the corner, watching. And when Gallagher died, it turned and looked straight at the camera. Story number 7, The Elevator That Went Too Far. I never took the old service elevator at St. Jude's Hospital unless I had no other choice. It was slow, outdated, and had a reputation for getting stuck between floors. The nurses called it a relic, a leftover from when the hospital was first built nearly a century ago. But that night I was exhausted. My legs ached, and the idea of taking the stairs down 8 floors seemed unbearable. I checked my watch. 2:47 a.m. The hospital was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt unnatural, as if something was listening. I hit the button. The elevator doors groaned open, the dim fluorescent lights inside flickering. It smelled of old metal and something faintly rotten. I stepped in, pressing the button for the ground floor. The doors shuttered shut, and the elevator lurched downward. Then something changed. The numbers above the door blinked 21G. The elevator should have stopped, but it didn't. Instead, it kept going. I frowned, hitting the button again. The light above it flickered, but the elevator didn't stop. -1. I felt my stomach drop. There was no -1 in this hospital. The lowest floor was the basement, where the supply rooms and morgue were. I jabbed the emergency stop. Nothing. The elevator trembled as it continued its descent. -2. A soft, static noise crackled through the overhead speaker. My breathing grew shallow. There shouldn't be any more levels. The light overhead flickered violently, casting erratic shadows along the walls. My reflection in the metal doors looked distorted, stretched. For a second I could have sworn its eyes weren't mine. The elevator shuddered to a stop. The doors did not open. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. The kind that pressed against my ears. I hesitated, then slowly reached for the door-open button. Before I could press it, a knock came from the other side. Not loud, just a soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap. My breath caught. I stared at the doors, my reflection shifting slightly even though I hadn't moved. Then, a voice. Going down? It wasn't coming from the speaker. It was coming from right outside the doors. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stay still. I forced my shaking fingers toward the panel, hitting every button at once. Nothing. The elevator wasn't responding. Then the lights went out. Total, suffocating darkness. A whisper slid through the silence, curling around my ears like a breath against my skin. You shouldn't be here. The air changed. It was no longer stale and metallic, but damp, rotting. The walls felt closer, pressing in. The floor beneath me felt softer, like old carpet soaked in something thick. And then the doors opened. I couldn't see anything beyond them, just blackness, stretching endlessly in every direction. The hospital was gone. Something moved in the darkness. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming closer. I held my breath, gripping the sides of the elevator. My body refused to move. A shape emerged. Tall, wrong, twisted. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was looking at me. The overhead speaker crackled again, a single word drenched in static: "Stay." I slammed my fist against the buttons, panic taking over. The elevator jolted, then shot upward. The darkness disappeared. The lights flickered back on, and the doors slid open to the ground floor. I staggered out, my entire body trembling. The hospital looked normal, bright, sterile, empty. I turned back to the elevator. The doors were still open, waiting. But the panel inside, it no longer had a -1 or -2, as if they had never existed. I never took that elevator again, but sometimes, late at night, I hear a distant knock, and a voice whispering, "Going down." Story number 8. The Night Shift Caller. The first time the phone rang, I didn't think much of it. The hospital was quiet, the kind of eerie silence that settles deep into your bones during the night shift. The only sounds were the occasional beeping of monitors and the soft shuffle of nurses moving between rooms. When the landline at the nurses' station buzzed, I sighed, expecting another late-night request from a patient. 2:13 a.m. I picked up. St. Vincent Hospital night shift. Silence. "Hello?" A faint, raspy breath came through the line. My stomach twisted. It wasn't static. It wasn't background noise. Someone was breathing. "Can you hear me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The breathing stopped, then in a low, cracking whisper the voice said, "I'm in your room." A sharp chill crawled up my spine. I turned, my eyes darting around the station. The room was empty. Just me, the desk, and the glow of the monitors. I swallowed hard. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice firmer now. Click. The line went dead. I exhaled shakily, trying to brush off the unease creeping under my skin. Prank calls weren't unheard of, even in hospitals. Maybe a patient messing around, maybe a wrong number. I set the receiver down, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The next night, at 2:13 a.m., the phone rang again. I stared at it, dread twisting in my stomach. Slowly I picked up. I didn't speak first this time, silence, then breathing. My pulse pounded against my ribs, the same slow, deliberate breaths. Then, just like before, the whisper, "I'm in your room." I slammed the phone down. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a patient. Something was wrong. I turned to the security cameras, scanning the halls. The maternity ward was empty. The ICU was quiet. Nothing unusual. But my gut told me something was here. I checked the caller ID. No number, no record. It was as if the call had come from inside the hospital. The next morning I told Sarah, the senior nurse, about the calls. Her face drained of color. "You answered it," she whispered. I frowned. "Yeah, twice. Why?" She hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. "Years ago, before you started, a nurse got those same calls, always at 2:13 a.m., always the same whisper. A few weeks later she was found." Sarah's breath hitched. "She was found in room 213, she finished, voice barely above a whisper. "She didn't survive." A chill swept over me. "How did she—" "She was alone," Sarah cut in. "The cameras glitched that night, no footage of anyone going in or out of the room. But when they found her—" She swallowed hard. Her throat was bruised, like someone had been holding it. I stared at her, my hands numb, and no one else was there, she said, finishing my thought. After that, the calls stopped. My stomach twisted. "They only happen when someone answers," Sarah whispered. "If you pick up on it, it doesn't stop." That night I sat at the desk, watching the clock. 2:12 a.m. I gripped the edge of the table, heart hammering in my chest. 2:13 a.m. The phone rang. I didn't answer. I refused to answer. The ringing stopped. I exhaled, relief washing over me. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe if I ignored it— The phone rang again, louder, faster. The sound filled the room, deafening. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then the lights flickered. A sharp, deafening click. The ringing stopped. I slowly lowered my hands. The hospital was silent. Then, a breath. Right behind me. "I'm in your room." I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty nurses' station, the dim hallway stretching out beyond me. But the air was heavy, thick with something I couldn't see. I turned back to the monitors, my fingers shaking. My gaze flickered to the security feeds. Something moved. My blood turned to ice. In the maternity ward, the camera for room 213 flickered. The door had been shut all night. But now, it was open. A shadow stood in the doorway. No features, no eyes. Just watching. The screen glitched. And then the whisper, this time, right in my ear. "I see you." The screen went black. I never worked the night shift again. Story number 9, The Mirror in the ICU. I never liked the mirror in the ICU. It was an old rectangular thing mounted right across from the nurse's station, positioned so you could see almost the entire hallway behind you. Most people ignored it, too busy with patients, too exhausted to care, but I noticed it. I always noticed it. Maybe it was the way the glass looked too clean, too perfect, despite never being wiped down. Maybe it was how the reflection seemed a little too slow, just a fraction behind real life. Or maybe it was the way I always felt like something was watching me through it. The first time I saw it, I was on my 4th straight night shift. The ICU was quiet, too quiet. The only sounds were the soft hum of machines and the occasional shuffle of feet from the other nurses. I stood at the station, writing notes, when I caught movement in the mirror, not behind me, in the reflection itself. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone walking down the hall, but the hallway was empty. My stomach tightened. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection wasn't standing the way I was. I was leaning forward, one hand on the desk. But in the mirror, my reflection stood perfectly straight, arms at its sides, staring. A slow, creeping dread slithered through my chest. I blinked, my breath caught in my throat. For a split second, I saw it smile. I spun around, my heart hammering, but nothing was there. When I turned back to the mirror, my reflection was normal again. I told myself I was exhausted, that I needed sleep. But deep down, I knew something was wrong with that mirror. The next night, I avoided looking at it. I kept my eyes down, focused on my work, on the patients. But around 3 a.m., I heard it. A faint, distant tapping. It was coming from the mirror. I swallowed hard. I wasn't going to look. I wasn't going to acknowledge it. I wasn't. The tapping got louder, then soft whispering. Not words, just sounds. Garbled, almost like someone trying to speak underwater. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to ignore it. Then from the corner of my eye, I saw something. A shadow in the reflection. Not mine, not anyone else's. Slowly, against every instinct in my body, I turned my head toward the mirror. Something stood behind me, tall, thin, featureless. Its head tilted slightly as if studying me. But when I turned around, there was nothing. I backed away, my chest tightening. My reflection was still there. But now it wasn't following my movements. I took a step back. My reflection stayed still. I raised my hand. It didn't. My breath turned shallow, my pulse thundering in my ears. The lights above flickered, casting long, stretched shadows across the walls. Then my reflection moved, not to match me, on its own. It raised a hand, but not in a wave, not in sync with me. It pressed its palm flat against the glass, and then it whispered, "Let me out." I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of charts. My hands shook as I scrambled to my feet. The ICU doors swung open, and Sarah walked in. She frowned when she saw me, pale, breathless. "You okay?" I turned back to the mirror. My reflection was normal again, perfectly still, perfectly in sync. I forced a shaky laugh. "Yeah, just thought I saw something." Sarah didn't smile. She glanced at the mirror, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't look at it for too long," she said quietly. I swallowed hard. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because sometimes it looks back." I didn't sleep that morning. I lay in bed, staring at my phone, reading old hospital records, searching for anything about that mirror. I found something. 15 years ago, a patient in the ICU had died right in front of it. Heart attack. The strange part: the security cameras caught something disturbing. Just before he died, the patient had gotten up from his bed, stared at the mirror for 5 full minutes without blinking, then collapsed. The last frame of the footage, his reflection still standing, even after he fell, even after the nurses rushed in. His reflection didn't move. I shut my phone off. I didn't want to know more. The next night I avoided it completely. But as I walked past, I felt it. The pull. Something in that mirror wanted to be seen, and it was just waiting for someone to look. Story number 10. The Screaming Bed. The first time I heard the bed scream, I thought I was losing my mind. It was my 3rd consecutive night shift at St. Augustine Hospital, and exhaustion clung to me like a heavy blanket. The ICU was quiet, just the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional rustle of movement from a restless patient. The worst part of the job wasn't the late hours or the endless paperwork. It was the waiting, the slow, creeping silence of knowing something was coming, but not knowing when. That night, room 411 was empty. It had been for months. The last patient to stay there had died under unusual circumstances, though no one ever talked about it. The room was cleaned, sterilized, and left vacant. No new patients were placed there. No one even stepped inside. So when I heard the bed screaming, I froze. It was faint at first, like the sound of metal straining under pressure. A slow, eerie creak that sent a chill crawling up my spine. I glanced at the security monitor. Room 411's screen was black, glitched. I swallowed hard and stood up, my heart pounding against my ribs. The sound grew louder. It wasn't just creaking anymore. It was a low, guttural moan vibrating through the walls. I grabbed Sarah, the senior nurse on duty. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She paused, her eyes narrowing. Then she heard it too. Her face went pale. "Not again," she muttered under her breath. I grabbed her arm. "What do you mean, not again?" She hesitated, then finally spoke. "It happened before, years ago, every time room 411 was empty." A cold lump settled in my stomach. What happened? Sarah's voice was barely audible. "The bed. It screams." The sound shifted, turning into something that made my skin prickle. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It was human. A long, agonized wail that filled the hallway. I took a step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Someone's in there," I whispered. Sarah shook her head. "Number? It's the bed." I didn't believe her. I couldn't. Beds don't scream. I grabbed a flashlight and forced myself toward room 411. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to pretend I never heard anything. But I had to know. The moment I reached the door, the sound stopped. Silence. I swallowed hard and slowly pushed the door open. The room was cold, freezing, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones and settles there. The bed sat in the middle of the room, covered in a crisp white sheet. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong, but the air was thick, pressing against my skin like an unseen weight. I stepped closer, my breath fogged in front of me. Then the bed jerked violently. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking. The mattress convulsed, the sheets twisting and writhing as if something was trapped underneath. Then a blood-curdling scream tore through the air. Not from me, not from the hallway, from inside the bed. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the nurse's station, gasping for air. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Did you see it?" she demanded. I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my mind reeling. She nodded like she already knew the answer. "We should have warned you." I stared at her. "Warned me about what?" She swallowed. "Room 411. The last patient that died there. They didn't go peacefully." I already knew I didn't want to hear the rest, but I had to. She hesitated before continuing. The patient was restrained. He kept screaming about something in the bed, said it was swallowing him. We thought he was delusional, sedated him, but... She took a shaky breath. One night, the cameras caught something. The bed moved, like something was inside it, pressing upward, writhing. When the nurses checked on him, I felt the blood drain from my face. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. He was gone. Just gone. No body, no sign of struggle. Just the bed and the sheets. She trailed off, but I understood. The screaming had stopped, because the bed had eaten him. I quit the night shift after that, but some nights when I drive past the hospital, I swear I can still hear it. The bed, screaming for more. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. But tell me, have you ever experienced something unexplainable? A shadow where no one stood? A whisper in an empty room? Drop your horror stories in the comments below. And if you love terrifying tales like this, hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling stories. Don't forget to check out the videos appearing on your screen. They might just keep you up all night.